Hey guys, my name is John Shin. I grew up in South Korea, immigrated to the United States, and I'll tell you what, once I got here, I started accumulating debt. I had a bunch of student loans. I had $500,000 in debt. I was at the lowest point, but I'll tell you what, I embraced certain principles into my life, and by embracing those principles, I actually became an author of a book. I became a movie producer, and most importantly, I grew up this amazing sales organization and had a nine figures in sales over my journey. I am one of the passionate few. I just finished an awesome podcast segment here with the one and only Omar. I'll tell you what, he asked me some questions that no one has ever asked me before. It was absolutely one of the best interviews I've ever had. And I've done a lot of interviews, but the reason why this interview was so good is not only good for what you guys are about to watch, but it was great for me as well. Listen, I was $500,000 in debt. And out of that debt, you know what? I didn't stay there. I changed some principles. And next thing I know, I made a movie called Think and Grow Rich, The Legacy. And recently I wrote a book called How Rich Asians Think. I'm now going on a world tour with Think and Grow Rich, the world tour, going to 50 cities into 12 different countries. Let me tell you something. What you're about to get out of this epic podcast over the next few minutes or hours, whatever it is, I want you to realize that you're not gonna like it, you're gonna love it. And you're gonna love it because it's gonna change your life. And I want you to change your life. And I want you to realize that what you take from this podcast will be something that could leave a legacy for the rest of your life. I hope you enjoy this podcast. You know, and I said, every time someone came to me about a business idea, I said, can we make $1 million? You know what I mean? I said, can we make $1 million?
That was a prereq.
Yeah, exactly. And they said, well, John, I think we can make a couple $100,000. I'm like, no, I don't want to do this. You know, but it was the first time that a guy actually said to my wife and I, dude, we can make $1 million.
Hey guys, welcome to this episode of The Passionate Few. Today we have a very special episode because we get to sit down with John Shin himself. Thanks so much for being on the show today, John.
Man, excited to be here.
Yes, sir. Thank you for inviting us to your beautiful home here.
Yeah, well, thanks.
Yes. I want to get into it. Now, a lot of people have seen what you're doing now with the Think and Grow Rich movement. Mm-hmm. I know you guys have had the licenses now to create the docu-film about it and educating people around the world. You're on a global world tour. But talk to me about John Shin, the man behind it, right? Because before you became a successful entrepreneur, you grew up not headed for, a multi-million-dollar situation, right?
Right.
It was through a series of events, meeting your wife, getting involved through the right instrument in business that you built your wealth. But take us back to the very beginning. Where did John grow up and what was his childhood like as a kid?
Wow. Well, first of all, I was not born here in the U.S. My parents immigrated to this country from Korea, and specifically South Korea, right? Because, now the people... you used to say Korea, and they would say, oh, is that part of China or whatever? But now I got to be specific, right? Because there is the North and there's the South.
Right.
So we came from South Korea. And why most people, I think, immigrate to this country is seeking that American dream. So for the parents, or my parents, coming to this country, their dream was not their children buying nice cars or clothes, but their dream was actually having their children get an education. And traditional Asian parents, and I think a lot of immigrants, their parents want their children to become doctors or lawyers.
Right.
So we had that. And in the Asian culture too, you can't tell your parents, this is my life, right? Don't tell me what to do. I mean, I guess you could say it, but man, you would feel it on the back of your leg with a bamboo stick, right? Or any other type of something, or just a good old hand beating, right? So we would never talk back to our parents. That was, just out of respect, we wouldn't do that, right? So my parents came here. We ended up they flew into LAX, got in a taxi, drove a few miles down, saw a sign that said rent, and they pulled in and they got ourselves a little one-bedroom apartment, and that's how I grew up, just a few blocks away from the original Tommy's Burger over by the Rampart District.
Yeah, in LA, yeah.
Yeah, in LA, yeah. And so we had multiple locks on our doors. We had bars on our windows.
How old were you at the time?
I was just 1 year old.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 1 year old. And that's where I grew up till I was about 6 years old. And then from that age, my parents saved money because they wanted to get better. right? And to have a better life, they were saving money because someday they knew they wanted to buy a house, right? So back then, to buy a house was only like $6,000, believe it or not, right?
That's insane.
So isn't it crazy? And so they went to go buy a house, and they were saving money, and we ended up moving to Glendale, and that's pretty much where I grew up, And even growing up in Glendale was very rough for both my sister and I, because we were the only two Asian kids, right, in the entire city. I mean, it was predominantly a white, community. And there were no Latinos, there were no blacks, there were no Middle Easterns. They were just all 99.99% white Caucasians. So,
Wow. How many siblings did you have growing up?
I got a younger sister, okay, and she's doing amazing with her life today. And so, but it was just the two of us, and it brought us together because we only had each other, right?
Yeah.
And so we're just a couple years apart. So we did everything together pretty much growing up in elementary school. But elementary was it was a very rough upbringing, because, when you're the only kid that looks different than everyone
picked
else.
on a bit, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, picked on, bullied. And I mean, people would say the weirdest things to me that I never even knew, that I didn't even understand what they were talking about, right? Because they would come up to me and say things like, hey, they would like literally get in my face and go, hey, can you see me? And I would look at them and I go, what? I'm not blind. You know what I mean? I can see you. What a stupid, so I never let that really bother me, right? Because I kind of looked at that person like, boy, you must be really stupid, right? Like, you're asking me if I'm blind, but I'm looking right at you, you know what I mean? So, and so it was just really bizarre that people would say things to me, and they had this, idea that everybody was from China.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And
Yeah.
even though I was
semi-Asian,
Korean,
you're just
they
China.
didn't know how to separate it. They just think that everybody who speaks Spanish is from Mexico, but they're not. I mean, there's so many different parts of Central America, Latin America, and even Cuba where people speak Spanish, and people just didn't think that everybody's Mexican, right? Nothing wrong with being Mexican, but I'm just saying that there is a difference in all the different cultures and heritage. And so it's just really weird to see everybody say certain things to me. And then, of course, when kids were bringing food to school during lunch, they're opening up a peanut butter and jelly bologna sandwich, and I'm whipping out rice with other kind of, the famous kimchi, because that's what we ate at our house, you know what I mean? So that's what I brought to school. So, and then kimchi was this like fermented cabbage, which smells like crap, right? You know what I mean? So as soon as I opened that up during lunch hour, these kids were like, he eats shit. You know what I mean? Like, these Chinese people eat shit. And I was like, I'm not Chinese, you know what I mean? And so it was just the things that people would say to me was just super bizarre.
Did it light a fire for you at that age to prove a point at all, or were you bullied for a while? I mean, what did it do to you?
Yeah, I never got picked. We would play a game called kickball. I don't even know what that is, right? Or dodgeball. But I was like, the weird thing about playing dodgeball is that, you get in a circle and you take these balls and you got people in the middle, they throw the ball at you, and if you get hit, you go out.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like whoever last man standing. The funny thing about dodgeball when I played, well, it wasn't so funny at the time, but I was the only kid in the middle, right? So everybody's throwing a ball at me, I thought I was Mr. Cool, but I mean, at the end of the day, I realized that was another form of what? Just bullying and picking on me and things like that, There was a game called kickball. It was always the two most popular kids, where one kid and then the other kid would, pick out the two most popular kids and say, I pick him, and the other one goes, I pick him, and, and everybody would get picked. But I never got picked, you know what I mean? So I'm like, well, what about me? And they're like, well, it's an even game, you're odd, so we don't have anybody else to play, so I never got picked to play, So it was a little rough upbringing, and then of course walking home was even worse because people would bully me, and people would push me around and all that kind of stuff.
Was it a lower income community, or where did you live as a
No,
kid?
not really. Glendale, I would say, was just like middle class.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And middle class.
So your parents had some money. It wasn't like they were totally broke at that time when you were growing up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we were not Beverly Hills, you know what I mean, and Bel Air, but we weren't like, in the barrios again, you know what I mean, because we grew up there. But we made a decision to move out. My parents wanted to save money and get out. They wanted to get better, right? And I hear people always, you have a choice in life that you could either be bitter or you can get better, right? Parents wanted to get better and they saved money to get out of their situation. So, but for me, growing up in a community where there were no Asians, it was very rough,
Of course, yeah.
So I got my butt kicked, inside a park. There were like 5 kids and they bullied me around and I got my butt kicked pretty good. Came home with a big fat lip, bloody nose, black eye, scratched up and everything, just rolling on the asphalt and stuff. And so my parents actually put me into martial arts. And that's when I began taking martial arts at around 7 years of age. And the school that I went to basically taught us 3 different forms. One was Taekwondo, one is Hapkido, and one is Judo. And the 3 different arts or styles were good for if you're long distance fighting or close fighting, or if you actually got on the ground, that you had a way of defending yourself in all 3 situations, So, it's interesting that when I went to martial arts school, I got picked up. There was a van that pulled up in our school, right? And at 2:30, that's who picked me up. And I came out with my backpack, jumped into this van, and I got driven off. And they took me to this temple, and I trained there every day from 3 o'clock till 11 o'clock at night.
How many years did you do that for?
25 years.
No way.
25 years, every day for 6 days out of the week.
What would you attribute, how much of your success would you attribute to the lessons learned through martial arts?
I think a lot of it, because, one thing that we learned is that it took us 7 years to become a black belt, right? So there was no ifs, whats, or buts. It was 7 years. And to sit there and think, not too many people got a black belt, right? So because, how many kids or how many people have the discipline to stay at something for 7 years to finally get there and get their black belt? Now, down the street from us, there was another school that opened up, and they were giving away black belts at 2 years. So when you're getting 2 years versus 7 years, now if we both go to a tournament, whose skills were better? Who was better trained exactly? The 7-year guy versus the 2-year guy, right? So it was interesting that when we got into the tournaments, people from our school always won, right? And so there's a lesson to take away from there is that there is no shortcut to where you want to get in life. And so I think martial arts was huge, and discipline and everything else. But I also, in my book and in my life, as I've studied people and what are some of the ingredients of people who became successful, I've discovered that there are 8 common denominators, right? In addition to the 13 that Napoleon Hill discovered interviewing 500 people. So,
what are those 8? Just for the audience listening that's now wondering, what are these 8?
First is a lot of the people that I interviewed, their background, when I find out about their success, they actually had a military background.
Interesting, wow.
Right,
so there's a hardcore discipline element involved.
Exactly, right? So that's one reason. Number 2 was they played sports somewhere in their life.
Yeah.
I said, tell me a little bit about, did you play sports? And they'll say, of course, they played football or basketball or some form of sports. And why do you think sports did well for a lot of people?
The competitiveness.
Exactly,
endurance,
right? So you got to be competitive. And so that was another thing. And the third one was they were usually a firstborn child. A lot of them were firstborn childs.
So they're used to being in positions of leadership or taking initiative or providing for others or something.
Exactly, right? Because mom and dad would say, hey, take care of da-da-da-da, right? Or, something ever went wrong, even though the little guy screwed it up, the oldest one always got blamed for it because we weren't supervising them properly or we were setting a bad example. And it was always that, guilt that parents instilled into the older child, right?
Were you the oldest of your siblings?
Yeah, so my sister, I have a younger sister, she's 2 years, and we're 2 years apart. And so that's another one, right? A fourth one is most of them were bilingual, right? So why are bilingual people do so well?
Yeah, I think they're taught to think unilaterally, right? Or multilaterally, I guess.
Yeah, multilateral, but also if their parents, like my mom, ingrained into my brain that we did not come to this country to screw up this opportunity.
Right, yeah.
Right? who how many immigrants sit there and go, yeah, we came to America because we want to hang out at Manhattan Beach, right? Or, you know what I mean? Or buy clothes at the malls. I mean, why would we buy the clothes here when most of that clothes is made in our own country? Does that make sense?
If anything, they aspire to sell the clothes, not buy the clothes.
Exactly, right? And so they were very entrepreneurial, You know what I mean? You know, they knew that, you know, my parents always said, man, we got to work harder than everybody else. Because no one's going to want to hire Asian people.
Were they entrepreneurs themselves?
No, my mom was actually a nurse, and my dad was a radiologist.
Oh, wow.
So they were both in the medical profession,
Right.
you know. But they would always say, you know, you got to own a business. You got to own a business, you know. And so, you know, I wanted to go into business. And so, yeah, fortunately, they directed me the right way.
So talk to me a little bit about your situation in high school. Obviously, you got into martial arts. You probably move away from the kimchi bullying and all that, right?
Yeah.
So talk to me about your first entrepreneurial ventures before you got into what you do now. Talk to me a little about maybe, I don't know, did you have a lemonade stand? Did you have a little side hustle? What were your first forays into entrepreneurship?
Gosh, you know what? I mean, great question. I actually, when I was in elementary school, you know, they had these fundraisers. And there were these chocolate bars that you had to sell. Does that make sense, right?
Yeah.
And you'd go door to door. I mean, we don't see too many door-to-door kids today. But I was so competitive back then that I wanted to be better than everybody else. Like, I wanted to beat them all. Like,
The number one chocolate
Yeah,
seller,
I want to be the number one chocolate sales kid, you know what I mean? And so I would walk up to, like, people's houses, knock on their door, and they would say, hello. And I was like, hi. I was like, would you like to buy one of the world's greatest chocolate bars? And they would say, these are very limited. We only have a few left, right? And so I said, I've got 3 left, right? And I would leave most of the chocolates down
out of sight.
Yeah, out of sight, like in front of their home, like on the sidewalk, right?
Even if you had a full box.
Even if I had a full box,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I would say, yeah, I only got 3 left. These are it. And does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then of course, they would come back with a $5 bill. And I was like, oh, man, I said, I don't have any change, but I'll bring you back 2 more chocolates, right?
Yeah.
So they would give me $5. I'd give them the 3, and I'd come back and give them like 2 more later, you know? So I always sold like 5 chocolates.
Or they'll say, keep it.
Yeah, they would just keep it, exactly. I'd make a couple extra bucks, right?
Yeah.
You know, and then take that and sell it to somebody else, you know, the extra chocolate that I had. But I mean, I was a salesperson, I think, even in elementary school.
You just had that natural knack for it, or was it a hunger? What was it?
I just wanted to beat everybody.
What was money the motivation, or it was competition? You go a little bit.
It was competition, because I wanted to prove to these kids, you know, you can bully me all day long, but you know what? I must outsell you in chocolate.
That's interesting that you say that. So would you say that chip on your shoulder was important because that's kind of what kept it hot, what kept the pressure on for you?
Yeah, like I wanted to let these kids know, I'm like, man, you're so dumb. Like, you think you walk around, you're a bully, but I'm gonna perform you all day long. So
you carried that chip on your shoulder with you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. What advice would you give, and we'll continue with your story, but what advice would you give to people out there who maybe they're not bullied, but maybe they have a chip on their shoulder, mom proved them wrong, or you know, mom saying that, oh, you know, you can't prove me right, or you know, maybe you have a significant other that doubts you, or just somebody in your life that's just giving you that negative, you know, chip on your shoulder. What would be your best advice to people on how to use it instead of have that chip on the shoulder, use them?
Well, I mean, the first thing I would tell people is you don't need other people's validation, right? You don't need someone else to tell you that you're great, right? As long as you tell yourself that.
That's right.
Like, and you believe that you're great, right? And so I always tell people that you don't have to be great to start something, but you do have to start to becoming great somewhere in your life, right? And so I always tell people that everything comes down to the way you think. You know, do you ever think about what you think about? Right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Because you got to think about what you think about. I mean, do you think about partying with your friends, hanging out at the clubs, smoking pot, drinking alcohol, you know, whatever you're drinking, right? How is that going to serve you?
That's right.
Right? So a lot of my friends that were smoking pot and they were smoking weed and they were, you know, and that back then, by the way, it wasn't even legal. So now it was an illegal substance. You know what I mean? And I knew at that point, it's like, my decision was, why do I even want to do that? How is that going to serve me, right? So I was always looking for things that would make me better in every way, right? So whether it be martial arts or whatever I got to do, you know. So, but everything comes down to the way you think, because I call it TFA, right? So whatever you're thinking about will influence the way you feel, right? And the way you feel, right, will affect the way you act. And then the way you act determines your results, and the results are directly correlated and tied to the way you think. So whatever you
reinforce
think,
your beliefs. That's right.
Absolutely, right? So whatever you think about is so important. If you keep on thinking about negative things, what do you think is going to happen into your life? It's going to get negative, right?
Absolutely.
But if you're positive and you've got a specific goal, right, then those thoughts, whatever you're thinking about, will get your feelings to drive for that. And then everything comes down to your actions, however you feel. If you feel like crap, you're not going to act, right? But act, the word act, ACT, is also an acronym, right? And what ACT stands for, A stands for appropriate. So you got to take appropriate action, right? And then C, it's got to be consistent. And then T is tenacity, right? Are you tenacious with all those things? So whatever you're doing have to be congruent. Your actions have to be congruent with your thoughts.
Makes sense.
Right.
Now, I do want to continue with your story, but I do want to ask you, since we're on the point, was there a point in your career early on, before you became a multimillionaire, where you were like visualizing? Did you have any sort of like incantations where you'd say, I see myself making millions of dollars, I see myself with a big team? I mean, were you actually consciously thinking about your thoughts, like you just said, before you had anything? Because I know you started off like in debt, student debt, like no money at all. So was there a lot of that personal development psychology that you took before you manifested it into reality? I mean, take me to the mindset at that time.
Yeah, like I always thought, ever since I was a little kid, I knew, right? I would say I was gonna be rich.
You just knew it.
I'm gonna be rich.
And you would just keep saying it.
Yeah, I'm gonna be rich.
So looking back, I want to ask you, how much of it was actual willpower versus was just an identity that you ingrained in yourself over and over? Like being on this side of the fence, you get what I'm saying?
Right.
Because there's people who are on the other side of the fence thinking, shit, I wish I had that. I wish I could live in Calabasas. I wish I could, have this kind of impact. So what would you tell the person on the other side of the fence looking at what you have now who wants to get there about how important it is to have the mindset right versus just the work ethic? Obviously work's important, but can you just hone in on how important it is to create that sense of identity, to talk to yourself like that and what it's done for you?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. We're all the same, right? Everybody, I mean, I'm a human being just like everybody else, right? I mean, cut me, it hurts, and I bleed just like everybody else. I'm not a robot, right? But it's people have created their own limiting beliefs, right? So I call it their own BS, right? Which is their belief system, right? So you bought into your own belief system. And so if you sit there and say, I don't deserve this, well, guess what? You're right. You don't deserve it because you're saying that.
That's right.
Right? But if you turn around and say that, I deserve that, I'm going to have that, guess what? You're going to get it because as long as it's consistent, right? That your actions are going to be consistent. Like, I know there's like books and people like law of attraction where you go, I'm going to be a millionaire. Money's going to come. You know what I mean?
Right.
Money come to me. It's like money's not going to fall out of the sky, right? But the thing is, the reason that people aren't where they are is because I call it poor. The reason why they're poor is an acronym, right? Which is passing over opportunities repeatedly.
Right.
Right? So you see different opportunities, but you don't see it. You don't even like jump on it because you've got these limiting beliefs that you don't even deserve it.
That's right.
Whereas like people, if I meet somebody, like you and I are doing this interview right now, and I kind of say to myself, why are we doing this interview? Right? What is the outcome? I just know when we connected and we said, hey, we're going to do this podcast show, it's going to lead to something.
That's right.
And it's going to lead to something massive where this little conversation is going to help some younger person to say, you know what? That's what I needed, right? And they're going to take that and we're going to help more people.
Okay, now let's go back to those 8 points. I know we're going down them. I think we're on point 5 or 6.
Oh, was this, the common denominators of people, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we talked about military background. We talked about firstborn child. We talked about sports, right? Another one is that a lot of these people already made $100,000 or more before in the past. They also had been in a leadership role somewhere before in their life, okay? But the one thing, and probably the most important one, that where all the wealthy people, there were 8,000 entrepreneurs who were interviewed, and the one common denominator that everybody had, the one thing that everyone had, is that they had somebody who believed in them. Whether it was a mom, whether it was a dad, whether it was a coach or a guardian or somebody believed in that person for that person to get to where they are.
Wow. And that was the common denominator.
That's the one common denominator across the board of 8,000 people who've ever been, interviewed and asked, what is the one thing? Is that they had somebody believe in them.
Wow.
So believe in people. So important that you believe in them.
Very interesting. Now, real quick on that note, what's the key to finding effective people to recruit, build as part of your team, as part of your mission? What have you found to be a common denominators among quality teammates, team members versus people who don't stick around or go the distance?
So it goes back to those 8 things, right? Yeah. So
finding something of those qualities.
Yeah, exactly. So as long as you find some of those qualities, But I mean, one of them, I think the most important one is coachability, right? So if
yeah.
someone's not coachable and they're always asking me why, then it's like, okay, next,
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like if you were in the military, right? And you're graduating from boot camp and now you're going to get deployed. You're going to go to some hostile territory and you got your drill sergeant or your gunny sergeant sitting beside you and he says, duck. And you say, why? What do you think is going to happen to you? Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You're not going to be coming back in a body bag, right? So when your coach or your mentor says duck, just move at the speed of instruction and don't be questioning them.
Right, yeah. Trust the leader.
Absolutely. Without
Makes
trust,
sense.
I mean, what's the point? Why do you even want that mentor?
Exactly. How can the team move if it's not in unison?
Exactly.
Absolutely. Now, let's get to your story because I
Okay.
think a lot of people are fascinated by it. Talk to me about how you got into what you do, and for those that don't know, kind of what the business was that you got involved in, and what was the first 1, 2, or 3 introductions to it? Because I think your wife got you into it. I don't know if
So we got into the
away.
yeah. So '94, my wife got into the financial industry.
So real quick, how did you meet your wife for the audience?
I met her in law school. She was in her 3rd year of law school, and I'd come to the campus to visit one of my friends, and she happened to be in a law library.
So you didn't go to law school?
I did. I just went to a different school.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I was already practicing law when
Yeah.
she was in her 3rd year, and so I came to visit my friend, and his class had not finished yet. So I went to go see him, just to hang out. And I was just killing some time, so I went into the library and hanging out, and I saw her. So,
You just approached her?
well, it was interesting because she was sitting like 4 tables away from me, but miraculously there was no one in between us. But I was actually checking her out, and I'm like, wow, she's actually pretty attractive,
Right.
And walked over and introduced myself, and said, hi, how you doing? My name is John. I said, are you 2nd, 3rd year law student? So we started having a conversation, and we became friends. And then 3 months later, I pretty much proposed to her.
That's incredible. And interestingly, I know you mentioned to me off camera that you guys were both in a relationship at the time, right?
Yeah. So I was in a relationship, she was in a relationship, and our relationship kind of ended. And we ended up, started hanging out with each other.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. You mentioned that you were in law school already. So from entrepreneurship, from your little entrepreneurship, the candy bars in school, and you had a few other ventures. Talk to me about why you got into being a lawyer, and was there a point where you didn't want to be an entrepreneur anymore, where you wanted to go into law? Talk to me about that phase in your life.
Yeah. So, I went to law school not for me, but I did it for my own parents.
Gotcha. So
Right.
you personally didn't know what you wanted to do. You kind of just went there for mom and dad.
Yeah, mom and dad, because,
Got it.
that was their dream. And so I was living their dream, not my dream, right? And so my dream is I wanted to make a lot of money, right? And people say,
What was the number for you at that time?
I think my whole life I always just said I want to become a millionaire, right? I
Yeah.
want to be a millionaire, But if I could make $1 million a year, man, that would have been awesome. Even today, if you're making $1 million a year, it's still pretty good money. You're better off than, probably 99% of the world, right? But, I wanted to make $1 million a year. So that's what I wanted to do, but I had to find a vehicle to do that. So when I met my wife, she said, I'm going to go in the financial service industry. And I said, every time someone came to me about a business idea, I said, can we make $1 million? You know what I mean? I said, can we make $1 million?
That was a prereq.
Yeah, exactly. And they said, well, John, I think we can make a couple $100,000. I'm like, no, I don't want to do this. But it was the first time that a guy actually said to my wife and I, dude, we can make $1 million. So I said, well, then why don't you try it? So she started in '94, and then a year later, I saw what she was making, so I quit my job and joined her in '95. So,
How old were you at that time?
gosh, how old was I? I think it was like mid-20s,
And then talk to me from that point to making your first $1 million. How long did it take?
Oh gosh, it was probably 5 years later.
5 years?
Yeah.
So were you good right away? Did you kind of have a knack for it? Walk me through the process of your first couple sales, if you got the knack for it, where the fire came from. What was it like once you started? Were you on a mission? Were you just dabbling? Where were you mindset-wise at the time when you started?
For me, to me, saving money was was like a common sense thing. Why? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People aren't saving money, but I'm like, why wouldn't you save money? But I remember going to see my client, and I asked her, I said, hey, do you want to save $500 a month? And she's like, she says, I got to talk to my brother-in-law about this. I was like, your brother-in-law? I was like, why your brother-in-law? Well, he's my CPA. And I'm like, CPA? And I go, so what does that have to do with anything, you know? And she goes, well, you know, he helps me make all my financial decisions. And I was like, financial decisions? And I was like, what? And so I literally, I reached into my pocket, right? I literally reached into my pocket and I like pulled out $100 bill, right? And I said, hey, let me ask you a question. Do you have $1 on you? And she says, yeah. And I said, here's what I want to do. I'll give you my $100 if you give me the $1. Would you do that? And she goes, of course I would. And I was like, oh, so you do make financial decisions on your own, right? So you didn't have to talk to your brother-in-law about that, did you, right?
I love that, yeah.
And she's like, oh, she says, oh, you're good. That was her response to me. And I'm like, I'm good. I'm like, it's nothing about me being good. It's the fact that I was like, you saw value in that. You know what I mean? And so I just started selling and I wanted to make my first $1 million. And I mean, I was so brutal. Like, I didn't even, like, I was so tough on myself that I didn't even want to celebrate. But I had to celebrate my little wins. But if I didn't make a sale that day, I didn't even come home. Like, I literally stayed in my office all night because I didn't want to come home, because I didn't deserve to come home.
You told me sometimes that your wife would even call you like 9, 10, 11 at night and say, hey, when are you coming home, John? And you would tell her.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she's like, are you coming home? I'm like, no, I'll be coming home later. She's like, it's 11 o'clock. I'm like, I know, but I'm going to make a sale first, and then I'm going to come home. And then it'll be like 1 o'clock. She's like, where are you at? I go, I'm at the office. And she's like, what are you doing? I was like, I go get a sale. And she's like, well, where are you going to get a sale from? I'm like, where am I going to sell? I don't know. Wherever there's some people, I got to go find where there's people. And so I was driving, and I remember seeing this place, and it said Denny's, right? So because Denny's is open 24 hours, right? So I actually went to Denny's. I walked in, and I saw people. I ordered a little Grand Slam or whatever it was for $2.99. And then I would find somebody in the restaurant and walk over to them and introduce myself. And then I would, I would basically say, hey, I said, you know, I want to tell you a little bit about this or that, and then turn them into a client. You know, but if I didn't close, I went somewhere else. And eventually, Denny's ended up sending out a bulletin to all the Denny's in Southern California. And they told me that I couldn't walk into a Denny's anymore.
Oh, so you were going to multiple Denny's doing that?
Yeah, so I went to one Denny's, and then, you know, if it was the same group of people that always came and ate there, like I kind of knew it was like the regulars that would come.
Yeah.
You know, and then I went to another Denny's, and I went to another Denny's, and eventually I came back to the one Denny's, and they said, hey, John, he goes, can we have a word with you real quick? And I was like, sure, what's going on? They said, well, listen, we got some memos from the corporate office, and they just said that we couldn't let you in anymore. And I went, what are you talking about? And so they said, yeah, well, I'm banned. And so I couldn't go to Denny's anymore. And so I had to figure out another place to go. And then I started hitting other restaurants, the IHOP, the International House of Pancakes. So I started going there, and then I got banned from there.
And you were doing all this by yourself?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just a man on a mission.
Yeah, because I had to make a sale. I want to be the #1 sales guy in the entire company.
And you ended up doing that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I did, for 5 years in a row.
That's incredible. Now, I know you have another story, too, about the doctor's office.
You know, after I got booted out of IHOP and I got booted out of Denny's, you know, I was trying to figure out where else I can go. And so, you know, Arlene called me one day, and she's like, where are you at? And I said, I'm not sure, but I'll let you know. And so I was driving, I saw this sign, and it said 24 hours. So I pulled into the driveway, parked my car, and I said, hey, I said, honey, I'm pulled into this place. It's open 24 hours. She says, where are you at? I said, I'm at the emergency room at the hospital. She's like, what? And I was like, yeah. And so I go into the hospital, and I got my roller bag with all my apps and everything. And I walk in, and I saw the security guard, and the security guard says, excuse me, sir, but we don't have any visitation rights right now. I said, oh, I'm not here to visit any patients. I'm just here to talk to all the doctors and nurses about their financial future. And so I just need to go up to OB/GYN. And he's like, oh, okay, let me get you a badge. So I get this badge, I put it on myself.
So you just won your way in.
Yeah, so I got my badge, and the next thing I know, I basically went inside and started going from floor to floor. And then even when I went in, I acted like I belonged there. You know what I mean? So I walked up to the nurse's office, you know, the nurse's station. I was like, hi, my name is John Shin. I'm the financial retirement guy. I go, where would you like me to get my computer set up? And she would literally go, well, let's put you in the doctor's room for now. So they would escort me there, and I'd open up my computer and acted like I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening
It's
right now.
working, yeah.
Yeah, it's working, right? And then I came out, I was like, okay, who would you like send in first with their retirement? You know, and the first person would come in, I'd sit down and do them. I'm like, all right, why don't you go tell the next person to come in? And they would just rotate and rotate and rotate.
It's incredible, yeah.
And that's what I did, and I started hitting all the different hospitals in Southern California.
That's incredible. And then do you have any other stories of things you like, lengths you went to that you haven't shared before to get deals or sales?
I mean, so basically I wanted to start going into companies like corporations, right? So I actually went down to, I would like literally like telemarket, you know what I mean? Like I'd pick up the phone, hi, my name is John Shin. I was wondering if I can swing by and talk to the owner of the company. And they're like, yeah, no, thank you very much. Click, right? Rejection after rejection after rejection after rejection. And it was a story of my life. So I was like, how do I get in? I got to be different by design. So I actually called up a business in the local area. I said, hello, my name is John Shin, and we just opened up a new shoe store down the street, and we carry all the famous shoes. We'd love to send a pair of shoes, pair of Nikes or whatever it is, to the owner of this establishment as a good gesture to the people in our community. And they came back. I said, I just need to know the size of his shoes. And they came back and they said, oh, he's a size 11, right? So I went and bought a pair of tennis shoes, right? Put one shoes in there, and I put a note and I sent it to that office. And then when the guy opened it up, he opened it up like, ooh, it was like a pair of Nikes or something, right? Because you can see the box was in a Nike box. And they opened it up and it was a note. And I said, hey, what's somebody like me got to do to get my foot in the door? Right?
Yeah.
And there was a note, and I said, if you can schedule 20 minutes with me, I'll bring you the other pair of shoes. Please call me at this number. And they actually called.
Wow, so they ended up working those ideas.
Yeah.
Do you find that top performers and ultra achievers, not just in the Think and Grow Rich movement, but in general, have always done that, gone to whatever lengths, be it unconventional, be it weird, be it whatever it takes?
Yeah.
Have you seen that happen across the board?
You got to do whatever you got to do, and you got to do things that other people don't do.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? Because if everybody is doing it, then everybody's, they already know that's what's working.
Yeah, and they won't stick out to you.
Exactly.
If anything, yeah.
So you got to be different by design.
Yeah, just like you had mentioned to me that you have people on your team that like went to great lengths to get in touch with you, and then you recognize that, hey, they were just like me because I used to do whatever it took. And so it becomes cyclical. You start building a movement with people who do whatever it takes.
Exactly.
Beautiful.
Exactly. So I had, like, for instance, I have these girls called the Glitter Girls that actually work with me now, right? And it was interesting because every day I get somebody who text messages me on my DM, not text, but they DM me on my Instagram.
They want something.
Yeah, they're like, hi, I'm a social media expert. I'm a marketing, Facebook, social media, e-commerce person, and my fee is $3,500, but I'll get you 1 million followers. And I'm like, delete, right? Another one, delete, right? Delete. And so it's interesting because I even have another guy named Dan Dover, who's my Instagram guy. And here's what he said to me that was very interesting. He goes, John, when you buy a pair of shoes, he goes, you do try it on before you buy it, don't you? I said, yes. And he goes, and you didn't pay for that, did you, to try on the pair of shoes? When you go buy a car, did you test drive it? I said, of course I did. He goes, you didn't pay to test drive that car, did you? I said, no. He says, well, listen, I would like you to try me out with my social media and my Instagram, right? Try me out without pay and see if I can get you the results. If you like me, then you can buy it. So this guy did 2 weeks of my social media before I even hired him on board for free.
By adding value first.
Exactly. So he brought all this value to me, and I'm like, ooh, he's actually pretty good. And then after I did that, then I turned around and actually retained the guy.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
beautiful. So talk to me a little bit about, and I want to go back to your business because it's something that you're known for. Obviously, in what you do, it requires building a huge team. Mm-hmm. Now, when it comes to you growing in business, I'm sure there's lots of ups and downs. What are some, before coming to the multi-millions you're at now, what were some of the biggest challenges you had in growing the business, and how did you overcome them? How did you turn them around, mindset-wise? Was there, tough times where maybe teams split apart, maybe you lost interest in the business, maybe legal issues, right? Talk to me about some of the toughest times for you and how you were able to get your mind right and get out of it and pivot forward.
So the hardest thing is that people come in, and when they want something from you, they're always the nicest people.
Right.
right? Because they want something.
Right.
You know, you find out who their true colors are during adversity. You know, so there are some low times in business and there's some high times, right? But I'll tell you what, 1999, there was some changes going up at the top of the food chain, you know, at the corporate office. We had just signed a lease, and I think our monthly rent was $15,000, okay? And all of a sudden, they said that everything is falling apart at the top of the food chain, right? So basically, the company that we were working with was going out of business.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, we're sitting here going, they're going out of business. And it's crazy because they're going out of business, but we just signed a 5-year lease for $15,000 a month. So I'd go to turn to my friends and all my associates. I'm like, all right, guys, we're going to do something. And they all started exiting.
Oh, shit.
One by one by one. So now not only is the company we used to work for going out of business, but all our people are now leaving.
Yeah.
Right? And it's interesting who your most loyal people are, right, during the toughest times.
Yeah.
And so I realized that, you know, you can't expect, you know what, loyalty, right, from cheap people. All right? Because there's a lot of people out there that won't be beside you at the lowest point. And so I realized that at the lowest point, the only person who's going to pick you up is you, right? So that means you got to go back to the grind again and do everything all over, starting from scratch, over and over and over. So in 1999, 2000, we actually had to rebuild our, excuse me, in 1999, 2000, we actually had to rebuild our company all over again. So we were, you know what I mean? It's like your business is going up like this. You're at the high horse, you know what I mean?
You got to start all over.
And then we had to start all over again. And the best thing that we did in that 5 year is that we did not over leverage ourselves, right? Because we did not have a $5 million home, you know, to pay for a mortgage.
Right.
You know, we didn't have the Rolls Royces and all the Ferraris and all that. We were still running lean and mean, you know? And so that's what saved us from probably going bankrupt, is that we learned how to save money. But man, I'll tell you, it was some dark moments, man. We were at the lowest point.
Talk to me about some other experiences at your lowest point. I know we had Ed Milet on the show, and he told us things like his water was cut off. You know, there was times where he had to go shower with his wife at a public, it was like a hotel or something like that, in an actual shower, in the public shower, and just take turns. You know, were there any low points? And the reason I ask is because there might be people listening who are maybe in their 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s or beyond in life or business, and they're trying to get things off the ground, but they find themselves stuck. Maybe they're in a low point now, and they're thinking, well, maybe John could do it, or maybe, you know, someone, you know, maybe the people in the Think and Grow Rich documentary or film can do it. But talk to me a little bit about, like, what were some of those tough times, like, specifically, that you can remember?
I mean, the hard thing for us is that we actually quit our jobs that we had when we first became entrepreneurs.
So you put it all on the line day one.
Yeah, so we quit our jobs. There was no part-timing, anything. We literally quit our jobs full-time. And I'll never forget it. I actually went to a convention, right? Because I didn't even know. So my wife basically started in '94, and she basically said, hey, do you want to go to Vegas? And I was like, all right. I go, who doesn't want to go to Vegas? I love Vegas, right? So let's go to Vegas. Yeah. So we go to Vegas, and we're checking in. And as we're checking in, I see all these people walking around with their goodie bags and all that kind of stuff. And I looked over at one of them, and I said, isn't that the name of the company that you work for? And she's like, oh, yeah. I'm like, oh, and there's another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. They're all carrying the bags. And I'm like, what are we in Vegas for? She says, oh, we're here for our company's national convention. And I'm like, what? So that's pretty much what happened. And then, you know, I got pretty pissed off that, you know, she didn't tell me the truth, right?
Right.
But anyway, long story short, when I was at the convention, I got so inspired and moved, I came back and I quit my job full time.
Wow.
Now, the problem that I had is I had no money in reserves. Like, I had no savings. I had nothing, right? I had some credit cards with a little bit of balance left over, you know, or credit line. I mean, you know, I had already leveraged myself quite a bit. So I walk into the office, and the guy says, hey, you got to go get a license. And I'm like, a license? I'm like, well, I can get a license. What's so hard about getting a license? Well, it took us 9 months for me to get a license.
Wow.
So during that 9 months, what I had to do is go get a job, right, at a restaurant called Claim Jumpers, and I became a food server. You know, so here I am. I've got my master's, I got my doctorate degree, I've got all this stuff, right? And I literally had to go and get a job to just put food on the table right? And then I delivered pizza for Domino's Pizza.
I can only imagine what your parents were thinking.
Right?
After
Yeah.
all that, now you're working at Clam Jumper and delivering pizza for
Exactly.
Domino's,
And
yeah.
of course, nobody knew, right? But I'm secretly doing that and driving around in my 1967 Volkswagen Bug, right? I had to roll down my window, with two hands, or people on both sides and maneuver the window down into the door panel. But yeah, it was pretty rough. And so Arlene and I remember our first Thanksgiving together, we actually had to crack open a little jar of quarters and pennies and all that kind of stuff to roll it up so we can actually go buy our first Thanksgiving meal together.
That's how broke you guys were.
Yeah. And I'll never forget it, sitting there watching my own wife in the closet crying as she's rolling up these coins, trying to figure out how we're going to put a turkey on our table on our first Thanksgiving.
That's fascinating. And she stuck by you the whole time from zero.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is off camera, we're talking with your daughter, and she was saying that she's literally never seen you guys fight.
No.
And that's something that you and your wife can attest to never fighting. Talk to me a little bit about, for the audience wondering at home, maybe they're in a relationship, maybe they want to be in an ideal relationship, maybe they're not in the right relationship.
Yep.
What would you say are your top 3 tips when finding the right significant other, the right life partner, whether you want to build, business and empire, but overall a sense of like a teamwork as you grow? What have you found to be the top, 2, 3, 4, 5 things?
So I think Arlene and I were very good at visualizing and always having discussions on what our life was going to be like. You know what I mean? So
interesting, yeah.
We said, hey, in 5 years, we're going to have this. In 10 years, we're going to have this. In 20 years, we're going to have this.
Even though the present reality didn't exactly dictate that future.
Yeah, it didn't. But we painted that picture together.
So you created like a visualization synergy, if you will.
We did. And we actually have some people call it a dream board or whatever you want to call it. But we really did. We really did cut out, pictures and sold ourselves, right, what it would be like. And then
That's insane. I love that.
Right?
That's so cool.
And then we would actually go to model homes, right? And we're like, wow. Can you imagine? Someday, we'll have a house like this. You know what I mean? So we sold ourselves the dream.
Does it trip you out to not think you live in the homes that you used to actually visit? What does that feel like?
It's really weird, man. We go back and we start to still see where we lived before, and we started off at a studio apartment. That was our first one. I mean, can you imagine? Most people, they get married, and you come out,
a honeymoon,
there's a limo, people are throwing confetti and rice at you, and you get in your limo and you drive off into the sunset.
Right.
You check in some 5-star hotel. You go to some dream destination, some exotic place like the Bahamas or whatever.
Yeah.
And Arlene and I, we stayed around and cleaned up after our wedding, right?
Yeah.
I put her in my Volkswagen and drove her back to my house. Right. Oh, I'm sorry. It wasn't even a house. It was a dwelling.
Yeah.
Right. And when I mean a dwelling, it was like 4 walls. It was a studio apartment.
How old were you when you guys got married again?
We were 24, I think. Yeah. Right. Mid-20s. And it was just 4 walls. So studio apartment. There were no walls in the inside. And can you imagine when my wife woke up? From any part of that room, that studio, you could see the family room, the living room, the kitchen, the bedroom, the bathroom, everything, because there's no walls. And when my wife woke up, can you imagine? She rolled over to her side. She opened up her eyes the day after we get married. And there I was, sitting on a toilet saying, "Good morning, honey." That was not my dream. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
To bring my wife back to my studio apartment. And I said to her, honey, I promise you, one day we will own a mansion. Well, we'll never, ever, and we'll laugh about the way we grew up, right? And she's like, really? And at that time, for us, a mansion was like a 4,000 square foot home. That was huge, 4,000, a house with 5 bedrooms.
And the house we're in as we film this, just one of your properties is, for context, what, 12,000 square feet?
Yeah, I mean, it's about 13,000 square feet, you know what I mean? And even now, we think this is still small.
Right,
We're looking to upgrade to a bigger house,
And how many properties do you own, give or take?
We have 4 properties.
Yeah.
It's our, different places. We have a ranch and stuff like that. Our main residence in Vegas, which is where our primary home is at. But, I mean,
So it's surreal to look back and think, you used to dream about this stuff, now it's a reality.
It's reality.
Do you ever look back on your notes and see the goals and like think, oh man, this is crazy, this actually happened. Like the words popped out of the page a lot sooner than we thought. Is there anything that you would maybe, and this is probably a good question, is there anything that you would have done differently, knowing how you goal set then versus how things happen? Is there anything you could have done better, even though you ended up manifesting those dreams, but is there anything you could have done better at that time, more efficient that time, maybe done sooner, just so that the audience, is there any wisdom that you can impart, just so the audience has context as maybe what they can do now as they sit here watching this, going for their goals and dreams?
Yeah, it's interesting because back then we didn't have Google, right? In the early 90s,
True.
We didn't have internet. We didn't
YouTube,
have,
yeah.
we didn't have YouTube. We didn't have, Airbnb. We didn't have podcasts. We didn't have YouTube. So today's generation is far better off in starting a business today than what Arlene and I had to do building up our business, But the main thing today is that stop living in a life of fear. And for instance, like we got the rights from the Napoleon Hill Foundation to not only write the modern day version of Think and Grow Rich and to do a movie of Think and Grow Rich. And it's interesting, everywhere I go today, people will say there's 4.6 billion Asian people on this planet today, and not one person called them up to write a modern day version of Think and Grow Rich the Asian way.
Wow.
Right? There's 7.6 billion people on this planet today, and not one called them up and said, I'd like to make a movie on the book. One of the things that people always ask me, they go, John, how did you get the rights from the Napoleon Hill Foundation?
Yeah.
And here's what I tell them. I asked.
Simple as that.
I asked, yeah. Ask without fear. A lot of people say, John, I was going to call up the foundation and ask him that question. I was going to call up right? Everything is I was going to, but you never did it, right? So the difference between me and everything else is I actually acted on what I said I was going to do. So me calling up the foundation the difference between me and everybody else, now everybody's coming in and saying after the fact, now they're calling the foundation and saying, can we do a remake? Because I'd like to be, what I mean? And they're saying no, but ask without fear. So I would tell the younger generation today, ask without fear, right? And you'd be surprised how many people would actually say yes.
That's true. Kind of like the interviews, even when we started the show, like we went after impossible guests and people would ask me, how did you get them? How did you get them? How did you get them? And I said, I would literally pick up the phone, loaded with anxiety, call, wing it, and just say, hi, who would be the best person to talk to set up an interview with this person or that person? And they'll go, that'll be Katie. I'll transfer you. Simple as that.
Right.
But people get in their head about like, oh, you must have done this and that and impossible. Did you pay them, right?
Right.
But in reality, it's just a matter of asking. Kind of like you in the hospital. When you sign up all the doctors and nurses, when you had no clue being there, you just put yourself there, ask, and you shall receive.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Now, talk to me a little bit about why Think and Grow Rich means so much to you. I'm sure on your entrepreneurial journey, you found personal development, right?
Right.
Talk to me about personal development and where that came into your life and how Think and Grow Rich became a cornerstone for everything you were able to create in your life.
So this book, because I didn't have a mentor in 1996, right? There was nobody that really wanted to help my wife and I, grow our business. And every person who I did talk to said, well, I charge this, right?
That's a very different culture than now with coaching and mentorship.
Exactly. More people are more giving today and wanting to share than our generation in 95. People weren't willing to share. People said, oh, I get paid to coach, I get this, and I didn't have a mentor. So, one of my friends actually said, go and read this book called Think and Grow Rich. I'm like, what is this thing? What is it? I like the title, Think and Grow Rich, right? So I went and got the book, started reading, and I'm like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. Like this is the foundation for everything. Whether it's a successful marriage, a successful business, to have your health and all that, it's where you've got to go, And so we read the book. It became our playbook for our employees, my staff, my team, my sales guys. Everybody had to read the book. My lawyers, my CPA. I met with my CPA. I'm like, hi, have you ever heard of a book called Think and Grow Rich? And they said, no, I've never read it. I said, okay, you need to read this if we're going to do business. And they all read it. And they all came back and said, oh my God, this is a great book. And so that book is my playbook. That's the foundation to everything. So,
what do you think are some of the key takeaways for somebody listening? Maybe they've read the book, maybe they kind of want to be reminded of points, or maybe they've never read the book, What would you say Think and Grow Rich is like all about? For someone out there who doesn't know about the film, doesn't know about the book, but maybe they're interested in personal development, what would be your summary as to what it is and why it would help them change their life?
So the reason why this book is so powerful, and even for this generation, that this book is it's an absolute timeless masterpiece. It doesn't matter when the book was originally written in 1937, and Napoleon Hill was only 25 years of age, and he went to Andrew Carnegie and said, Mr. Carnegie, what is the secret for people to becoming successful? And he said, why don't you go and interview all my friends? I want you to interview this guy who actually thought that he can actually move a carriage without horses. And his name is Henry Ford. Go talk to him. Go talk to these two brothers that thought they can actually fly like a bird.
The Wright brothers, yeah.
The Wright brothers, exactly. Go meet this guy who actually thinks that they're going to be able to extinguish candles and they'll be able to have a new form of light that they can provide. And he interviewed a guy named Thomas Edison, right? So he went and interviewed over 500 of these kinds of people, which none of them, right? All these 13 principles were learned behaviors, okay, that they all adopted through their life. And that's the great thing, is that even today, this generation, if they go and embrace these principles that they can learn and apply them to their life, they will manifest these kinds of success in all areas of their life if they finally apply the principles to their life.
What are the top 3 for you personally that are the most profound from Think and Grow Rich? I know it's loaded with wisdom, but if you had to say John Shin's top 3 lessons, quotes, concepts, ideas from Think and Grow Rich off the top, what are some of the most powerful ones that have done the most for you in your life and business?
I think the first one would be to decide. Just make a decision. Stop staying on the fence, you know what I mean? And just decide. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, just do it. Just make the decision and call the shots. You call the shots, not asking everybody else, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Right? Just make a decision. And the word decide in itself is if you look at the word de, is a root word to mean to do. Do. The word side, right, means to die. That's why we have pesticide, homicide, suicide, right? So it's either do or die. Make a decision. You're either all in or you're all out. You're either an entrepreneur or you're not. But it's interesting how many people say, well, I want to build multiple streams of income.
Right, yeah.
Well, that's nonsense too, okay? I mean, you don't start multiple streams of income on day one. You have one stream of income where it's like a cash cow.
A strong stream, yeah, that's right.
Does that make sense, right? Yeah, but J-Lo, she's got like 20 different streams of income. She's got the hairline and the makeup line and the clothing line. She's got all these different lines, perfume line. But that's not how she started.
That's right.
Right? I mean, J-Lo started with one core thing first, built that up, had her core cash cow, and then when she got that cash cow, she took that money and then started diversifying. But I see too many people like, what do you want to do when you grow up? Well, I want to be a real estate agent. Okay, so what else are you going to do? And I hear these people, what do you do? Well, I'm a part-time real estate agent. I'm part-time network marketing. I'm also a notary public.
I'm a DJ on the weekend.
Yeah, I'm a DJ on the weekend. I do this, I do that. You're not all in.
Jack of all trades, master at none.
Yeah, exactly. So just go all into one thing, make a decision, and go all in. So that's, I would say, one most important thing. Number 2, I think, is to have an organized plan. They say that you don't plan to fail, but people fail to plan. Exactly, right? So I'm a huge planner. I'm very strategic in how I want to do certain things, and I put everything down, right? If you actually go in the other room, you'll see all these big white posters all on my wall, right? And these posters are my plan on how I'm going to do everything. And every speaker that I got on the tour with me, all these big A-list people who get $50,000 to $200,000 an hour are coming on tour with me because of my organized plan, right? Even Tim Story, and I know you interviewed Tim Story,
Yeah,
right?
we just had him on the show 2 days ago, yeah.
Yeah, even Tim Story sat in that chair right there, right? And actually went into the other room and saw this entire plan. And that is the only reason why he decided to come on tour with us.
Wow.
Right? Because he knew that there was a plan. Organized planning is everything.
Beautiful. Now, number 3, the third concept from Think and Grow Rich.
I think the third one is probably what Napoleon Hill talks about, which is he says that the starting point of all achievement is desire, right? A burning desire. If you're not hungry, right, and you don't have that burning desire, I think that if you hit a little bit of an obstacle, you're going to give up, you know? And to be an entrepreneur, you've got to be crazy. You cannot be like everybody else and be the status quo. If you want to be a successful entrepreneur, you got to be obsessed. You got to be thinking about it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, nonstop. That's like the only thing is that you are obsessed with your mission and your goal and your purpose.
I love that. Now, let me ask you this, because it seems like you were very focused throughout your whole career. Give me your best piece of advice that you've ever been given by anybody.
The best piece of advice was one of my mentors said, never make a decision at the lowest point of your life. Because we have cycles in business, right? And when you're at the lowest point, don't make a decision. Because there were, as I told you earlier, where I actually worked with somebody. I trained that person. I taught them everything, right? And then all of a sudden, they decide that they can actually go do it better somewhere else, right? It's that old saying where grass is greener on the other side.
Right, yeah.
Right? And where is the grass green?
Where you water it.
Where you water it, exactly, right? And that person actually left, and then they crippled, they died, filed bankruptcy, right? And it was so unfortunate, but it also hurt our business too, because our business numbers went down. And then at a certain point, I'm just going, oh my God, is this worth it? You know, and so I actually had to go and seek counsel from my mentor, and he says, don't you make a decision at your lowest point. He's like, where were you at the highest point? You just got to get yourself back up to the high point again.
And start making decisions there.
Exactly. So,
okay, what about the worst piece of advice you've ever been given in life or business?
Ooh, the worst piece of advice. Ooh, no one's asked me that before. The worst piece of advice. Ooh, God, that's a good one. You stunned me. I don't get stunned. The worst piece of advice that someone gave me would be to flip homes. Buy real estate and flip homes. Because you know the people who told me to buy real estate and flip homes?
Real estate agents.
Yeah, they told me to do that, right?
Yeah.
They only tell me about the one good case. They don't tell you about the other 45 that they didn't make any money
Yeah,
on.
that weren't profitable. Yeah,
that weren't profitable because you put all this money into the house to fix it up and make it look pretty, and then you turn around and sell it. But by the time you did all that, paid the commissions, paid this and all that, you broke even. It was just a lot of stress, you know?
What about mindset-wise, the worst advice mindset-wise? I'll give you an example. We asked, I don't know if you're familiar with Dave Meltzer.
Of course, mate.
So we had Dave on the show, and Dave said that one thing he learned is actually that the worst piece of advice oftentimes can come from the people that love you the most. A significant other, a mom, a dad, people who are looking out for you, who want you to play it safe. Mm-hmm. So is there anything like that that rings a bell or buzzes towards you? Maybe people along your journey that gave you advice with good intent, but had you taken it, you wouldn't have been able to get to where you're at now? Anything like that pop out? Well-intentioned bad advice, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, one was to go to college. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think if I didn't go to college, I don't know. Some people say, John, you are where you are because you went to college. But I mean, I sit there and think about how much money I invested in college. It's like $500,000, you know? But now I do feel that there's a place for people to go to college.
Right.
But for what I wanted to do, which was to make money, I didn't need to go to college for that.
So you're saying entrepreneurially it wasn't a priority, but for people who maybe aren't entrepreneurs or aren't yet thinking about entrepreneurship, college might have some value there.
Yeah, so if you want to become a heart surgeon, I don't want you to go to YouTube University and learn how to become a heart surgeon, right? It scared the shit out of me, right? So where'd you go to college or med school? YouTube. I'm like, oh my God, like, don't touch me, buddy. Are you with me, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if somebody is, just saying I want to make money, which is what I wanted to do, right? Then, I would probably not have gone to college, right? Because that's what I wanted to make. And I hear a lot of people, John, you seem like you're all about money. And I'm like, well, yeah, I kind of am because I want to make a lot of money, right? I want to have a lot of money. And they go, well, money doesn't make you happy. And I'm like, well, I mean, money is not going to make me happy, but it's going to help me find what's going to make me happy.
Yeah, and being broke won't make you happy either.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
So, I like having money. And I've been broke.
Yeah.
Okay? I mean, I was so broke. I mean, I couldn't even pay attention. I mean, that's how broke I was, right? I mean, what am I doing? And I was listening. And the worst thing I was doing is I was listening to what? Broke people telling me, right, what to do with my life. And so I always told people nowadays, I say, just get rid of all those toxic people. Get rid of them. Like, what are you holding on to these people that aren't serving you, right? I mean, it's got to be a win-win situation. I want to hang out with people who's going to serve me, right? And how I can serve them back. There's got to be some reciprocity. It's got to be a win-win. And so I got rid of toxic people real fast. All these people who said, John, you're not going to make any money, right? This is crazy.
It's a scam or
whatever.
It's
a scam. It's a scheme or whatever. Dude, you got to be crazy. I'd go back to law, man. At least that's stable. And well, look at all my friends today. They're all broke, right? They don't have any money. They can't go on vacations, right? I like to ask people, how many vacations do you take a year? Like real vacations, not camping, right? I've been there. I've camped. I need a vacation from that vacation, right? I mean, because it's like, that's work. I want to go where I'm just like, what? Just pampered and, all that kind of stuff.
Time freedom.
Yeah, that's a vacation.
I love that.
Right? So I wanted to make a lot of money.
Now let's talk about that money part here before we wrap up the interview. When it comes to money, obviously, there's a certain mindset shift going from 6 figures to 7 figures, 7 figures to 8 figures, and then above in your net worth, in the 9-figure range. But can you talk to me about the different levels of psychology that occur? Because what got you to 6 figures won't get you to 7 figures. What got you to 7 won't get you to 8. What got you to 8 won't get you to 9. Can you talk about those levels and the mindset required for people out there who have ambitions to climb up that economic ladder?
So I think for me, this is where the word mastermind really becomes very powerful, right? So when I was hanging out with certain people at a certain income bracket, and we're all making $500,000, there's that saying where they say that if you're the richest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room.
That's right.
Right? And I started to realize that these $500,000 earners all had the same mentality.
That's right. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And then I got to the $1 million and they had the same mentality. But all of a sudden, when I pulled myself out of that $1 million mentality and started working with people up here, I changed. Like my thinking changed. Right? And then I got to the next group of level, and those guys, their mentality changed. So all of a sudden, it's a whole different league of people. And so I had to quickly change and adapt to the circle of people that I was hanging out with very quick. I didn't want to get too comfortable. I always said, look, you got to change your environment on a daily basis, constantly. And you know what's going to happen when you leave that? Like right now, I'm already at another level, and the people that I'm with, guess what? They're talking about me behind my back, right? So there's a couple things. I said earlier, you got to get rid of toxic people, right? People say, John, how do you do that? How do you do it? Is change your voice message on your phone. And they go, really? To what? I go, I got one for you. How about this? Change it to this message right here. Say, I'm making some changes in my life. If you don't hear from me, you're one of them. Change that on your voice message and see what happens, right? Now you got what? You've already cut ties with all these losers, right?
You burned a lot of bridges already, yeah.
Yeah, but it's okay because if you're not even, if we're all making $1 million a month now, okay, now we're making what? We're making, $12 million a year, and they're comfortable with that, and I want to go make $1 million a week. I'm outgrowing you.
That's right.
Does that make sense? I mean, I can't associate with you and think like you and hang out with you when I want to go to here and you're still here and you're good.
Yeah, the frequency will taint you. Even if you're a good person or a nice person, it's going to inevitably seep into you.
Yeah, and I don't have anything, I don't have anything personal, but then what do these people say? They start talking about me.
Oh, John's greedy.
Yeah, John's this, John's that.
It's never enough, money hungry.
Yeah, exactly. He's so materialistic, or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, come on now. Don't you want more in life? If you say, I don't want more, I want my kids to be better off than, and have more to start off with.
That's right.
And more tools and resources than what I started off with. That's crazy.
That's right. Progress equals happiness.
Exactly.
Now, talk to me a little bit about what you do for your parents, because I know your parents were a huge drive for you as a kid, and now you told me that you actually pay them, you have them on payroll to do something fun. Yeah. Can you share with the audience what you've been able to do with your wealth for your parents? Because I think there's a lot of people listening out there who not only aspire to be wealthy for themselves, but to do it for others, especially, significant other, mom, dad, the grandma, grandpa, maybe, people who raised them. and you were able to actually do that, make that dream a reality. So can you give the audience a little bit of inspiration by sharing with them, what you do for your parents now and how they're able to enjoy their life at the highest level?
So I want to give you a little bit of foundation there. So in the mid 40s, my mother's mid 40s, she actually had a heart attack, right? And when she had a heart attack, it was like, you have this thing where you go, how did this happen to me? Does that make sense, right? I mean, it always happens like, how does this happen to me? When something bad happens, you never thought it would happen to you, but when it did, you sit there and you go, how did it happen to me? When someone says I have cancer, how did it happen to me, And when I was a young kid, to sit there and see my mom have a heart attack in her 40s, I was just kind of like, oh my God, we haven't even made it yet. Like, you know what I mean? Like the saddest thing for me right now, the scariest thing, and I don't have a whole lot of things that I'll admit to, because I always tell people I'm not afraid of nothing, but the one thing that scares the shit out of me is the fact that my parents actually saw poverty, they saw wars, they saw, just a lot of adversity in their life, and then never saw their children become successful, and then died. Can you imagine? To sit there and say, man, we came to this country to put our kids in a better place, and they would die someday knowing that they didn't even know that their parents, or their children actually, became somebody. So that drove me with a sense of urgency.
I love that you say urgency, yeah.
And people are going to talk about you. Hey, look, I know for a fact, I'm 95% sure, people talk shit about me behind my back. They talk about me, they talk about what I'm doing, not doing. I'm 95% sure that's happening. But you know what, Omar? I'm 100% sure that I don't really give a shit. And no one else should. No one should ever worry about what other people are thinking about. You just worry about you. Because at the end of the day, guess what? Who's going to take care of my parents? Who's going to sit there and take care of my mother and my father? Nobody's going to take care of and the government's going to take care of my parents? What, on a social security check of $1,500, $2,000 a month? That can't even pay for rent today. Okay? So it is up to me that I got to take care of my parents. And that drove me. Right? I wanted to just do everything for my parents.
Would you say that was the number one driver?
Oh, yeah, no question about it.
So in building your business, so how important was it for you to remember that? Like, I got to do it for them versus just, I want to make money, I want to make money, I want to make money.
No, my parents were everything.
Okay, and the reason I ask, and I want you to sort of zoom in on it, is because I think there's a lot of people who have a little bit of shallow motivation sometimes.
Yeah.
And as you know, money motivation doesn't last. Because, if you don't get the money, you'll get discouraged. Or if you get the money, you'll go, shit, what now?
Exactly.
Right, but when
same thing happened with my cars.
Exactly, yeah. You got the car, you're like, oh shit, another one came out the next year. So you get another one. That's why, although your driveway has about 12 exotics on it right now, I'm sure to you that means far less than being able to, do something for your mom or do something for your dad to get them to experience the joy of their kid worked hard and now they get to enjoy the spoils of your labor.
Right.
Talk to me about what they get to do, because I can't wait for you to share that with
us.
Yeah,
so now, like my parents, first time I came home, I told my mom, I'm like, Mom, this is for you and Dad. I want you to take this check and pay off your mortgage with it.
If you don't mind me asking, how much was the check?
It was $185,000.
Yeah.
Okay. But that was a long time ago.
How did they react when you gave it to them?
Well, the first time I pulled out the check, and when you call your mom, right?
Yeah.
And you go, Mom, I'm coming over, and she says, what's the first thing they say?
Okay, I cooked something.
Yet? Did you eat yet? And I'm like, yeah. I
said, got some kimchi ready for you.
Yeah, exactly, right? And some seaweed, and So I come home, and even though I had eaten, I still had to eat, right? Mom was cooking. And Mama's cooking, you can't go wrong.
Right.
And I sat down, we eat, she clears the table, and she's like, what's going on? Everything okay? I'm like, yeah, Mom, everything is great. And I said, I just wanted to give you something. And had my coat on my chair, and I pulled it out, and there was an envelope, and I slid it across, and I said, Mom, here you go. Go ahead, open it. She opens it up. It was a check. And she looks at it, and she's like, oh my gosh. She says, what is this? I go, Mom, I want you to use that money and pay off your mortgage. And she's like, no, no. And next thing you know, she was like, Daddy. And he's like, on the couch chilling out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, whatever. He's like, Mr. Chill. And he's like, Daddy, look at what your son is doing. And I was like, yeah. And she's like, honey, she says, when did you start selling drugs? And I was like, drugs? I go, Mom, I'm not selling drugs, Mom. I go, I'm a financial guy. She says, you cannot be a financial guy. She says, that was your worst, course in high school? You're so bad in math. You cannot be a financial guy. I go, Mom, I'm a financial guy. I really am,
Yeah.
And she was like blown away. And she still thought that I sold drugs until I took her to a national convention. And I took her to a national convention. It was like 30,000 people in the room. And that year I was the MVP of the entire company.
Wow.
And they awarded me a Humvee, right?
A Hummer, yeah.
A Hummer. It was on the stage. It was turning, a big yellow Humvee. It was turning around and all that. And I couldn't believe it. Arlene and I stood up on our feet. The crowds were screaming and cheering. I couldn't believe that I was the MVP. I grabbed her hand. We marched up to the stage. And I look up there, and my mentor, a guy named Monty, comes over and he says, I'm so proud of you. He gives me a hug. I started getting teary-eyed. I started crying a little bit because I was just out of joy. And I look over and he goes, where are your parents? And I said, they're right there. And he goes over to the edge of the stage and he goes like this and he tells them to come up here, come up here.
Wow.
So my mom and dad, they get up. And this is the moment that my parents saw their son successful, saying, you know what? Them coming to this country was worth it.
Wow.
And they started coming up on that stage. And my mom, I walked over to my mom to give her a hug. And my dad, and at that moment, they walked right by me. I'm like, what the hell? They walked right by me, right? Yeah. And they went right into the Humvee. So my mom is in there below the wheel. You couldn't even see her. She's going like this out the window, like the price is right, like she had just won the car. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at that moment, I'm telling you, it was just such an awesome feeling. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And everything that I did at that moment, I'm telling you, it was like, whew, everything I ever wanted to do, I did it. I finally did it. And to sit there and see, guess what, your parents crying?
Yeah.
Holy shit, man. It was unbelievable.
Everything you had worked for in one moment, yeah.
Yeah, right there. The reason we came to this country, to seek that American dream. And you know what? Dr. Martin Luther King said most people die at the age of 25. We just don't bury them until they're 80.
So true.
Because why? We've given up on all our dreams. We've allowed other people to steal it from us. Why? When we have the world today where people like you are creating these unbelievable shows and podcasts that they can watch your show and learn from so many amazing people, right? It's incredible.
And it's a true testament that if you think and grow rich, like if you just start thinking, putting stuff in your mind over and over by consuming this content, you too can become, the few who do versus the many who just dream and wish and talk and let it fade.
Yeah.
So thank you for being an example of that. But I do want to get to what exactly your parents do.
Oh, I forgot about that. So now my parents, they're payroll, right? Because we got the money.
So you have your parents on payroll now?
Yeah, they're on my payroll.
Okay.
And what I want my parents to do is I wanted them to see the world. Right? So not only did they see their children become successful, but I wanted them to travel the world. So I told them, go and find dream destinations and tell us where I need to take my team to go and enjoy our life as well.
So just on vacation anywhere in the world?
Yeah, so they're touring around the world, finding the right hotels, the right cruise ships, where we should do our next contest.
And you just give them a blank check to do all that?
Yeah, I mean, they got a credit card and they do whatever they want to do. Yeah, so they're living their life, and it's one of the greatest things that anybody can do for their parents,
I love that. And they're still alive right now?
They are, thank God, knock on wood,
That's incredible. Very cool. Now, as we sum up the interview here, I just want to ask some personal questions, and then we have a game before we wrap up.
Okay.
Okay. So I want to ask, for people who are listening, maybe their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, beyond, who are maybe not in a position where they found, like how you found the vehicle of the financial industry. Maybe they're looking for their passion, their purpose, their mission in life, some sort of vehicle to make their dreams a reality. Because I'm sure, kind of like you, before you found this vehicle, you had a dream to be more, but you didn't know where to channel it into. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you've seen there's tons of people with potential but don't have a vehicle. what would your best advice be to someone who's lost, broke, trying to figure it out in a rough situation right now, listening to this interview, moved by your words, who wants to get out of the rock bottom situation they're in and break through? And maybe they even have money. Maybe they're not broke. There's a lot of people who are successful and unfulfilled and lost and miserable. But what would John Shin, if you could condense all your decades of wisdom, everything you've learned, not just from interviewing people with Think and Grow Rich, not just from the millions of dollars you've been able to generate in your business, but if you can condense all that wisdom into a minute or two of advice, what would you tell people out there who are lost and looking for answers in life?
So here's the thing. John Maxwell, another amazing author, said that you have to love what you do. You have to love what you do and do what you love. For you to find what you love to do, you have to ask yourself, right, what would you do even though if you didn't get paid? Right? And for me, helping people every day in some way, I would do it even if I didn't get paid. I mean, I just love helping people. If there was a minefield, it's like I left the footprints for everybody so they can just put their feet in my footprints and get to the other side. Avoid the mines on the minefield. So I would tell a young person today, number one, first thing they've got to do, read Think and Grow Rich. If not read Think and Grow Rich, watch the movie Think and Grow Rich. That's number one. Number two, find out what your dreams are. Because you got to have dreams, right? Big dreams. Your dreams have got to be so big. I mean, like massive dreams, right? And this is why some people, they get to $500,000 and they stop. They get to $1 million and they stop because their dreams are too small, right? Your dreams have to be so big that you've got stretch marks on your brain, okay?
I like that.
Okay, I mean, that's how big you got to dream, right? And so you dream big, okay, and then find a coach to help you get there. Because without a coach, you're not going to get there. You can't just go wing it. You can't just go one day, that's it. I'm just going to get there. You got to find somebody that's going to help you. Like when we made the movie, what do I know about making a movie?
Yeah, zilch. Yeah, nothing.
Nothing. I've never made a movie in my life.
But your hunger, your desire, it drove you to figure it out, find the way, create the way, will it into existence. Yeah.
Right. So what did I do? I went and found somebody who didn't just make a movie, but became an Academy Award-winning producer, right? And said, hey, can you help us out with this movie? Right? When I wanted to write a book, I didn't just go, let my big ego get in the way and go, I'll just figure out how to write a book. I'll wing it. I'm John Shin. Well, who the hell's John Shin? People don't know who John Shin was. Does that make sense? I wasn't going to be stupid. I had to humble myself, right, and go find somebody who has not just written a lot of books, but sold a lot of best-selling books, right? And so I found a bunch of people. What better person to find than someone who's sold over 35 million copies and has got 7 New York Times bestsellers, a lady named Sharon Lechter, right? Who also is the co-author of a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So I sought her out and said, Sharon, could you help me with my book? So I don't know anything about writing a book, and she helped me out, right? And whatever she told me to do, I did it. I moved at the speed of instruction.
And that goes back to what you're saying about coachable.
Coachability.
Yeah. Like they say, every new level of your life is going to demand a new level of you.
Yeah.
And so if success leaves clues and there's mentors and you're emulating them, it's only a matter of time before you bridge the gap.
That's it.
Makes sense.
That's it.
Now, what about insecurities you're currently dealing with? It could be in your life, in your business. And the reason I ask about this is because there's a lot of people listening that sometimes have, the syndrome where they feel like, oh, well, of course, John could be successful or Omar could be successful or whoever they look at and want to model. What are some insecurities you're dealing with just so people can see that you're a normal dude just like them with your own insecurities, your own reservations, things you're uncertain about? In spite of that, you take action anyways, but could you share any, maybe challenges, insecurities, things you're dealing with right now, just so people could see in real time that you too have your own challenges and, maybe share some insight about how you're going about figuring it out or moving out of that?
Well, like insecurities in business or insecurities
in life or business,
or whatever it is.
Yeah, insecurities in life or business. Like, hey, I have a new business launching, and I didn't do so well initially, or maybe I had a recent legal situation that threw me for a loop, or maybe I had a I don't know, some sort of situation that is plaguing you emotionally. It could be business mindset. And again, the reason I ask is because I find that so much of our audience resonates deeply when someone else is going through, for lack of a better expression, a shitty time in their life too.
Yeah.
Because they go, shit, if John could do all this and he's dealing with shit, damn, I'm dealing with a ton of shit. I can do it too. Mm-hmm. So is there anything that you're currently dealing with on personal, professional levels that you'd be willing to share and like maybe give some insight about how you're working through it?
Well,
Or are you just totally awesome?
I mean, I think some of the insecurities are more like parenting, which I don't know if the younger generation
Sure.
can even relate to.
Yeah.
But, I think I don't really care what other people say about me, as I said to you earlier, but I do care about what my children say about me, right? And what my wife thinks about me or says about me. So that's big, right? So like the world can talk about John Shin and say things about me, but I wouldn't really care except for people that are the closest to me, right? So those would be with my kids. So I would say I always wonder if I'm actually being a good father to my children,
Yeah, that's a good one.
right? I want to make sure that I'm being the best husband because you don't get to have multiple dads and you don't get to have multiple husbands and you don't have to have multiple brothers unless you did, but if you had a brother, right? Am I being like my sister? I'm her only sibling. So am I really being the best brother to my sister? So I wonder if she's wondering, God, I wish my brother would be better. So that's on a personal level, right? But the next insecurity I think is we've lived a very private life. So, we're not used to coming out on social media and people are saying, John, you got to tell everybody about all your cars that you have. I'm like, why? I mean, those are for me. I don't want people to know what I have.
Right.
Tell them about your homes and your planes and like I don't want people to know about that. That's for our family to what?
Enjoy.
To enjoy. I don't want to go tell the whole world. Yeah, but you should, and I was like, no, I don't want to do that. So my insecurities, I would say is that people say, John, you got to post more. You got to post more. You got to post more. And I'm like, I don't want to post more because I'm actually worried that people are going to say, oh, what a shitty post that was, right? Or what a shitty video he just posted, like what, and not like it. Does that make sense, right? Because I'm trying to deliver content, but I want to give them great content. Does that make sense? So I do care in a way where I say, well, I don't give a shit what people say about me, but I do care if I'm providing content, that it's good content that I'm providing, that it's not just a waste of my time. I'm not doing it to feed me. Does that make sense? But
Yeah.
it's hard for me to sit there and go, ooh, look at my cars. You know what I mean? Look at my home, look at my other toys or whatever,
Makes sense. Now, the last question I have is, what do you hope someone who listened to this interview, maybe plays it back over and again, what do you hope that they take away and learn from your story and go and apply to their life?
I think the whatever they take away from this story, from this interview, I hope that everyone will say that they believe in themselves that they can do this thing, right? And I'm not trying to preach here, but let's just face it. We know that a person being born is a miracle,
That's right.
right? I mean, the fact that you were born, you are a miracle. I mean, it's like the odds of you being born is unbelievable.
Yeah, like
right?
trillions of odds
Yeah,
to
trillion
one.
to one, right? And many people they can't even have babies, right? So the fact that you are born, you're a miracle in itself. And in fact, every child, every person who is born is a masterpiece, right? And I say that because you're a piece of the master, right? And
I love
so,
that. Yeah, good way to put it.
right. So why would you doubt that your creator created you to be anything but to be the best? So, you may not be a great public speaker, but you're probably super good at something else, right? Not everybody has to become this awesome rock star, Tony Robbins type speaker, but maybe you're somebody else and you're going to be able to provide value to somebody else. So I say, find out who you are. What is your calling in life? What is your purpose, as people would say, right? And if you don't know what, find somebody to help you discover those things.
I love that. Very cool. Now, you ready for our game here at the end?
Okay.
It's called First Things First.
Okay.
So basically, the way the game works is I'm going to rifle off 10 phrases or words, and then you just tell me the first word or phrase or answer that comes to mind. Does that make sense? So think of it like just a quick response game.
All right.
Make sense?
Yeah.
The only rule is that you can't repeat yourself twice.
All right.
Okay, so I'm just rifle off words or phrases. You tell me the first word or phrase that comes to mind, and then we go so on and so forth until we hit 10, and that's it. Make sense?
Yeah.
But okay, you ready? Mm-hmm. All right, first word, or first one. Does money equal happiness?
Yes.
Failure.
Does sucks.
Rejection.
Embrace it.
The hardest point in your life so far?
Hardest point in my life this far, world tour.
Your greatest achievement, your greatest single achievement in your life thus far?
My marriage.
Ooh. Keys to a successful marriage. For this one, you could give me a little bit more than an order of phrase. 3 keys to a successful marriage relationship.
So, do you know about the 5 love languages?
Yes.
5 love languages all the way. You know, which is gift, right? Arlene loves gifts. They don't have to be expensive, but it's
It helps if they are.
yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
right? But it's just even the little things that I was thinking
Yeah.
about her, you know what I mean? So sometimes when I'm traveling, I go to the airport, you know, I pick a little thing up, bring it home, like, hey, I got a little surprise for you. And she's like, oh, what is it? It's cool, you know? Number 2 is physical touch, right? So that's important to some people and not so much to other people, right? So, and then is words of affirmation. So some people love to be say, you're awesome. Oh, that dress looks great on you. Oh, you look so pretty. I love that makeup. I love those sunglasses. You know, so whatever. So that's words of affirmation, right? Next one is
Acts of service. I believe.
acts of service, exactly. So that's huge for Arlene. She just loves when I, you know, open the door for her. So 25 years later, I'm still opening doors on the car for her, right? It's for
Yeah, I
most
love
guys,
that,
it's
yeah.
like 2 weeks, you know what I mean? After that, they don't do it anymore.
Yeah.
So, but for me, I'm still opening the doors for her, right? I still, you know, do a lot of fun things. I'll even, and for her one thing that she loves is she loves the fact that I cook for her, right? And so I'm like, all right, I got it, you know. And it's not just going out and having a dinner. You can always have a nice dinner, but the fact that I went and bought all the ingredients, right, and cooked it up and had a 4 course meal, she loves that acts of service. So yeah.
Very
So
powerful.
the 4 times I did that, we end up with 4 kids. So I'm just kidding.
Worked out.
So and then the last one. What is the last one? The acts of service. You got
So we did physical touch, words of affirmation.
quality of time.
Yeah, quality time, spending quality time with
Yeah,
one another.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think those are huge. I think the author of that book nailed it, and we've embraced that, and we're all about that. And so we do have date night, okay? And instead of doing a date night, we do a date day. So we'll get up in the morning, we go hit the spa, you know, we hit all the little steam rooms and all that, and then in the afternoon we'll go and have sushi together. And then we go hit acupuncture together, actually. And then we'll go and come back, get ready, and have a nice dinner and go see a show. So it's like an all day. Well, we do that once a week, excuse me.
Yeah. Powerful, man.
So-
Once a week, I love it. Now, what about how to level up friends? Earlier in the interview, you mentioned it's important to level up friends. So, what would your best, quick phrase of advice be to people who want to level up their social circle?
Masterminds.
Get involved with masterminds.
It's a must.
So 3 more real quick before I wrap up here.
All right.
Number 1, the biggest limiting belief you ever broke through.
The biggest limiting belief that I broke through. The biggest limiting belief that I'd never become a millionaire.
The toughest challenge that you've had to overcome.
The toughest challenge, forgiving.
And the last one, you ready?
You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying when I say forgive? It's just, I'm one of those guys where I'm like super what? Like, I love everybody. Does that make sense? And until you prove me wrong, I don't care what other people say, until you and I have that bad experience, I give everybody a clean slate until you prove me otherwise, right? And once you betray that one trust with me, I have a hard time forgiving. And so there's people that I just don't even forgive today, and it's been a while, just because I feel like the ultimate betrayal, So I need to still forgive so many people, but I have a hard time doing it.
Yeah. Makes sense. Now the last one, you ready?
Yep.
What you hope somebody listening to this interview goes and does immediately after finishing it.
So the first thing I want somebody to do after watching this is to go down on a piece of paper and write down exactly what they want. right? I want them to write down the 10 tangible things that they want. Those are the material things, right? Whether it be a Rolex, a car, a house, I mean, I don't know, whatever the 10 things are. And then I want them to write down the 10 intangible things, right? Which is not like something you can buy and hold. So what was it? What would those 10 things be, right? And then find a mentor, find a coach. And if you don't know where to find one, come to a Think and Grow Rich World Tour event and start masterminding with the best people out there.
I love it. Thank you so much for
Okay.
being on the show today, John.
All right.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to follow John and the Think and Grow Rich Tour in the description below. And until next time, thank you for being one of the passionate few.
If you guys enjoyed that video, be sure to hit that subscribe button right now, because every week we bring you the very best in personal development content, interviews, and insight to help inspire you to take your life and your dreams and make them a reality. And also, if you want to know how to book dream guests the same way I have, you can check the link below for my top 3 secrets. So if you have a podcast or a show or whatever it is and you want to collaborate with them, if you click that link below, I'll give you those top 3 secrets to help you get in touch with anybody. And also, don't forget that The Passionate Few is available on media platforms as well. So you can subscribe to the podcast. And until next time, thank you for being one of the passionate few.